I'm going to talk about telomeres and I'm going to talk about stress responses and how we can either respond to stress as a threat or as a challenge, and how that actually can affect something called our telomeres. Now, telomeres are little strands on the end of our chromosomes in the DNA, which actually act to protect genetic information. And there's been a lot of research done over the past 20, 30 years on these and their connection to the longer the telomere, the more longevity you have, so the less risk for cardiovascular disease and any other diseases that can affect the length of our life. And there's been a lot of work and research, and there was a woman called Elizabeth Blackburn who won the Nobel Prize for looking at the function of these telomeres. And it's just come up with some very interesting things that I just wanted to talk about, actually. Two things. When they started to see and correlate the length of telomeres and longevity or potential longevity, how long you live, they started to look at specific factors as the research went on, and lots of other people. There's been thousands of research projects now on this, and how obviously you can increase your longevity, and looking at how particular enzymes function on it, and if there is a way of breaking through. An interesting piece of research that I was just looking at was this idea of how perception of stress affects telomere length, which is, of course, a marker of longevity and illness tendencies. And they looked at caregivers for, say, for example, children who have learned severe special needs, autistic, etc., and they looked at how the stress involved with caregiving with someone who needs a lot of care, how that can affect the telomere length. And they found, first of all, that actually it does. Chronic stress in that particular situation can actually affect this factor, the telomere length. But they found something that's actually more interesting after that, which was it depends on how you perceive the stress. Okay, so they looked at it in two ways. And one of them is if you perceive stress as a threat, it has a different reaction as if you perceive stress as a challenge, and that is a mental shift. It's a difference, threat versus challenge. And the reaction of the body, if it perceives threat, it goes directly, affects part of the brain called the amygdala and sets up a lot of complex patterns in terms of survival mechanisms in the body, including stimulation of the adrenal glands to produce cortisol. And if you perceive stress as a threat and you produce long-term effects of cortisol, they can affect to suppress the immune system, for example, amongst other things. Whereas parents who looked at the stress of looking after their child as a challenge, they would get short bursts of cortisol. And this short burst would actually stimulate them into action. It's different. So the problem is long-term cortisol can deplete the system, especially the immune system, amongst other things. But short-term bursts of it are relevant and necessary almost to respond to life. They also looked, another part of it, where they were looked at particular types of mindfulness, Zen meditation, and did a group of studies around doing a 12-minute meditation where you just stay in the moment and allow whatever to come up. It's a very simple form of mindfulness meditation. And how that changed the way that people perceive stress in terms of threat and challenge. And consequently, the telomere lengths And so one of the earlier pieces of research was around some Zen monks who they checked the telomere lengths of them compared with a control group, and they were significantly longer, an indication of potential longevity. So it's a fascinating subject, and this idea of threat versus challenge, I think, is really important. And I'm going to certainly be talking about that a lot more when I'm my upcoming kind of online course, Anxiety Breaks, when we're dealing with anxiety and managing chronic and short-term anxiety. And there's a whole process involved with that and a whole series of practices which develop some of these ideas. But apart from that, what are other things that can lengthen your telomeres, or telomeres, some people call it? There's a herb called astragalus, which has been shown to have some positive effects on it. There's some research in China that says if you take more than 3 cups of green tea a day, I think it's to do with the antioxidants, it can actually have a positive effect on the telomere. Managing weight, obesity has a negative effect. Lots of different antioxidants. Exercise is very important, and managing how we manage stress is very important. So there are things we can do that can help all this. Another very important part in the discussion of maintaining your telomeres and with regards to longevity, etc., is to do with community and how one perceives oneself within community. It's a really big subject, and I'm going to talk about that actually quite a lot with this online course I'm talking, because community plays a huge role in terms of managing stress and longevity. Anyway, I'll come back and I'll talk about that on another podcast. But I wish you well.